What motivation do we have to serve the Lord? What motivation do we have to serve the Lord, even if the numbers choosing to serve Him are few? This is a discussion on the history of lost landmarks and lessons learned. We are in the process of predicting the fate of certain landmarks that have been in the news lately, such as the David O Mckay Mural in Hawaii. These are landmarks that find disapproval from political correctness. Scripture from the vineyard parallel to today's events comes from Jacob chapter 5. And it came to pass that when the Lord of the vineyard saw that his fruit was good, and that his vineyard was no more corrupt, he called up his servants, and said unto them, Behold, for this last time have we nourished my vineyard. And thou beholdest that I have done according to my will, and I have preserved the natural fruit, that it is good, even like it, as it was in the beginning. This is at the end of the 5th chapter of the book of Jacob, answering the questions, what motivation do we have to serve the Lord when it seems there's few numbers at times doing so? To begin, we go back 52 years to the events in Coalville, Utah. Lessons from the Coalville Tabernacle. This is obviously a picture of the razed, destroyed building. Beautiful work of art. Some of the finest craftsmanship in the history of the state of Utah was put into building this amazing, beautiful landmark. Many questions came up as to why decisions are made to tear down such beloved and historic landmarks, such as this. This is from an article on dialoguejournal.com, justifying the need to tear this down according to those in charge. The church then decided the tabernacle should be torn down. President Reed Brown pointed out that the decision was authorized by the First Presidency, approved by the Council of 12, and received unanimous approval of the Stake Presidency, the Stake High Council, and all of the Summit Stake bishoprics. Before voting, all of the bishops of the stake interviewed each of their families individually to discuss their feelings on the matter. Finally, in accordance with church procedure, a vote of adult priesthood holders was held. The meeting was advertised beforehand in priesthood meetings, and it was announced the special meeting, quote, would concern the building program, but no specific proposals were mentioned. At the meeting, the men were asked to vote, quote, to sustain the stake leadership in its decision, to tear down the old building and construct a new one. The vote, as expected, was unanimous in support of the stake leadership. Some later said they abstained from voting, but no one voted against the decision. It would be a courageous but foolish decision to raise your hand in opposition when it is framed. Do you support your church leaders in their calling and the inspiration they have to make decisions for you? Abstaining from voting is the best they could muster. So we're looking at a principle of common consent and how this can be used to take down historic landmarks such as the Coalville Tabernacle, and in the future apparently the mural in Hawaii, the David O Mckay Mural. If we look at the universes in the church, if we may be forgiven for using those words, we see some overlap. If we were to make a Venn diagram, we would see on one side the anti-Mormon, anything goes crowd, find a slanderous bit of information, verify it according to opinion rather than actually digging into it and going to these sources themselves. Perhaps look into the history. Those who knew the prophet Joseph Smith, their testimonies are numerous. And on the other side, you have the original teachings of the church. That would be the church, the restored gospel through the prophet Joseph Smith. Many of the apostles that followed him were quite loyal to Joseph Smith. Of course, they're absolutely loyal to him, and his teachings continued as long as there were people alive who remembered the prophet Joseph Smith. In between, we have this alternate universe now that exists in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's an alternate universe of interpretation within the church now, and almost everything goes, almost anything goes, with some exceptions. So we have a little bit of a crossover with the anti-Mormon when they bring up a point forcefully. Many in the church will accept it without knowing there's ways to refute it. And of course, there's a little intersection with the original teachings. There is still some connection with the original teachings in the church, in the current Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And we do see, however, two universes, the original teachings being one, and the alternate universe created today, multiple interpretations, finding new ways to put context into what they supposedly thought but didn't teach in the original church, because we're trying to make it fit with modern political trends. And in all of this, this is something that encompasses all the modern appointed experts and designated or accepted church scholars to teach the people what is and isn't. Book of Mormon geography, for example, intent of Joseph Smith versus what he actually said and taught and was understood by the people in the original church era. So the first universe, of course, is a dwindling universe, that which encompasses the origins of the church, and is that universe which establishes the gospel of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints based on the teachings of the prophet Joseph Smith and the saints who knew him personally. The second universe is the rapidly expanding alternate universe of theories and revisions to the early church leaders, which speculates and theorizes on aspects of the gospel, which presumes that the prophet and eyewitnesses to the founding of the church did not fully understand what their beliefs are, and therefore needed modern persons of high social status in the church to analyze what the early church taught based on the potential context for what alternate interpretations might be applied to original teachings and testimonies of the early saints. This is almost becoming a guidebook to how to use this principle of common consent to accomplish the means to take down historic landmarks in the church. It's very effective, and it's shown to be very effective. The roots of modern religious beliefs have interpretations where and when did they start? There's a revisionist history now in full swing in the church. Did this start back in the 1980s? We have the famous forger Mark Hoffman, widely reported in the 1980s about gaining the trust of the leaders, absolute trust, finding documents miraculously on a very frequent basis that altered the understood church history up until then. An important point of understanding is those two different universes in perspective in the history of doctrine in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They should be differentiated and given proper credit for what each of those universes stands for, because in the early church, at no point in any point of those discourses of early church history given by those original leaders did those apostles leave open any possibility that future generations would come along and be allowed any authority to create alternate contexts to what they, or perhaps the prophet Joseph Smith, said, nor create new interpretations, as in, quote, what the prophet Joseph Smith should have meant. And so we are in an age in the world right now, Thessalonians 2, verse 11, and for this cause God shall send them strong delusion that they should believe a lie. There's some key scriptures that can help us understand the context of the times in which we live. Of course, a very common one is Matthew 7, verses 13 and 14. King James Version, we will not use alternate versions of the Bible than the King James, the newer ones. Enter ye in at the straight gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction, and many there be and go, which go in thereat, because strait is the gate, and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it. For the bed is shorter than a man can stretch himself on it, a man can stretch himself on it, and the covering narrower than that he can wrap himself in, and that is from Isaiah 28. Back to Isaiah 28. Woe to the crown of pride, to the drunkards of Ephraim, whose glorious beauty is a fading flower, which are on the head of the fat valleys of them that are overcome with wine. What does that mean, overcome with wine? Is that literal drinking alcohol, wine, and being overcome from that? When they speak of the drunkards of Ephraim, are they actually getting drunk in the physical sense, or is this more pertaining to their own qualifications and titles and beliefs that others have told them that they are the experts of this interpretation of the current church? Church teachings filtered through these experts, and when you get them in colleges, BYU professors often come out with something that's not what we knew before. And where do they get this information? So the question is, who would the drunkards of Ephraim represent? I will leave it to the viewer to make that decision for themselves. But in the two universes, the drunkards of Ephraim represent those who provide a guiding influence in reshaping the pre-purposed interpretations of the teachings, the original church and the prophet Joseph Smith. For example, the professors and the scholars, those who are ambiguous in where their testimonies are, those who apply 21st century shifting values to discredit and disprove the faith in that alternate universe. What is it about this mural, the David O Mckay Mural, that is making many leaders uncomfortable, particularly in Hawaii? We see children saluting the flag of the United States of America. The flag is held by David O Mckay. One of his visits to Hawaii, he visited this daily routine of every day they would raise the flag and salute it. This just happens to be a picture of him taking part in that. So it does apparently look like we're embarrassed about the flag itself here. Since there are so many reports of the people in Hawaii being upset that this is even considered to be removed, this represents a symbol of their culture. They even call it the equivalent of This Is the Place monument in Salt Lake City. This is something their ancestors worked for and represents a foundation for the people in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Hawaii. What is it, if you would please comment, that disturbs people enough that they would want to remove this? You see a church president, David O Mckay, at the time, this is approximately 100 years ago, there he is as a young man before he became church president, visiting Hawaii. The date apparently, from what I understand, is 1921 that this event took place. Just simply an apostle from the church visiting Hawaii, and the children and the people enjoying the visit to their daily ceremony of raising the flag, saluting the flag as David O Mckay holds the flag. So how could this happen when we remove these historic landmarks, and how could members of the church be persuaded to cut themselves off from and support the destruction of their own heritage? Are those leaders in that particular area of Hawaii that oversee this mural, are they actual people of that state? Are they of that heritage of these children in the picture? Reportedly they are not. They have come from the outside. Now we're going to go back and compare this now to the Coalville situation back in 1971 when they tore down that tabernacle. Is there a parallel? Quote, Mabel Larson of the DUP charged that the vote was unfair because, in many words, the proposition was presented not as a vote on a building, but as a vote sustaining the leadership in its decision. Do you support the leaders of your church in their calling? Do you support the leaders of your church in their mission to provide spiritual guidance and leadership, and often is represented as a prophetic calling? Their decisions should not be questioned because of the office they hold. Therefore, you would not dare vote against them. So continuing her quote, the people were led to believe it was a choice of tearing down the tabernacle or not having any new facilities at all, in two wards where, according to her, it was presented fairly, Upton and Wanship, and the vote was against tearing the tabernacle down. Mont Winters, a ward clerk in the Hoytsfield ward of some estate, and an opponent of the demolition, said the people did not vote their convictions in church. How can you stand in church and say no? The people were scared into voting with the authorities. So does this answer the question of how the principle of common consent could be used to accomplish a means to take down historic landmarks? And is this the means to remove opposition to taking down the David O Mckay Mural in Hawaii that's could be happening before the midsummer? The concept that the church was governed by the principle of common consent is another quote, and these quotes come from dialoguejournal.com. It contended that members of the summit stake of the said church as a group were never given the opportunity to give their consent to the demolition of said tabernacle prior to the time the decision was made to demolish said structure. It gained worldwide media coverage, as a matter of fact. The silver lining is that it was such an embarrassment that many of the tabernacles that were slated to be destroyed since then were actually able to save their buildings due to the embarrassment this Coalville situation caused. In the two universes, the drunkards of Ephraim represent those who provide that guiding influence. Is this an example of that, when you bring people from outside of Hawaii to lead those stakes, and you put their leadership as inspired straight from the headquarters itself? There's been efforts to raise money, but those questions of, can we save this? Can we raise funds for it? Apparently those are not being answered. And so is this a cost? Is this simply a financial decision? We can't afford to keep the mural? Or is it just simply because some are finding it embarrassing, or trying to blend modern church culture with modern world culture? And so many church members assume, like it says here, surely common sense will prevail and the powers that be will see the value of this priceless historical work. So perspective will look again back on that Coalville Tabernacle fiasco, and let's see, is the sentimental will of the people going to be steamrolled once again? Are there people that are native to Hawaii, meaning that's where their ancestors were? Are they in favor of removing this mural? Are they in agreement that it's making people uncomfortable for politically correct reasons. Let's go back to those lessons from the Coalville Tabernacle. So there's towns still proud of those unused Mormon tabernacles, as the Los Angeles reported in 1997, Los Angeles Times. They are saving some of these as historical buildings. Sometimes they convert them to other uses for the town. Once again, is it the flag that is making people uncomfortable? Is the United States flag becoming an embarrassment to the political correctness of our times? And is that the case in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints itself? Is the church becoming embarrassed regarding the United States flags and what the principles of the Constitution and the United States itself represents to the world? Here's an excerpt from one of those articles on dialoguejournal.com. Again, it was listed officially as one of the top 4 or 5 historic sites in the state of Utah on the Utah State Register. This is an objective organization, not church connected. This is only a year before that the Coalville Tabernacle was turned into a pile of rubble. Reports are it may have happened during the night. When they woke up, it was gone, or it was reduced to what you saw in the picture. It was so contentious. The stake president was actually called a liar by a local member of the church, and the church was taken to court, and the process of church decision-making was seriously questioned by many faithful members. Is this what's going to happen in Hawaii if that mural is coming down, whether people have a say or not? Reading from this article, the dominoes set off within the church hierarchy by the Coalville incident have yet to come to rest. The bitterness may remain for years. The Coalville Tabernacle was a beautiful and inspiring building. Its historic importance was emphasized by the Utah Heritage Foundation, which called it one of the 4 or 5 outstanding LDS buildings still standing. The craftsmanship and the workmanship was impeccable. Many of the finest craftsmen of the 1800s emigrated to Utah with the church, and their work is evident in all of the old buildings, those that are still left. Many who grew up in Utah can probably give a story of seeing a beautiful old building torn down that caused grief to the local people. Maybe you've seen, as I have, the temples themselves have that beautiful work ripped out of them, such as in Manti, and replaced by fabricated materials. And you see them laying on the ground, and the workmanship's impeccable and beautiful. The wood is clean and fresh and not rotted in any way, but for some reason this workmanship is just torn out and replaced by something that may not last as long as the original workmanship was designed to last, hundreds of years if you take care of it. So the Coalville Tabernacle had its share of church history. In 1886, while the church authorities were in hiding over the polygamy issue, the general conference of the church was held in the still incomplete tabernacle. This was one of the few conferences held outside Salt Lake City since pioneer times. $1,500 was raised by the Relief Society women of those times, and they also sent to Belgium to buy stained glass windows. We're going to look at a picture or two of those. Many of the residents of Summit County had fathers and grandfathers at that time who had worked years on the tabernacle, which is under construction from 1879 to 1899. Here's some of those stained glass windows. They're absolutely beautiful works of art, imported from Belgium. We're going to conclude this presentation with reading of Jacob 5. This is verse 35, and we're going to look at the parallels and how does this actually describe our modern times in the world and in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Verse 35, and it came to pass that the Lord of the vineyard said unto his servant, the tree profiteth me nothing, and the roots thereof profit me nothing, so long as it shall bring forth evil fruit. Nevertheless, I know that the roots are good, and for mine own purpose I have preserved them. And because of their much strength they have hitherto brought forth from the wild branches good fruit. But behold, the wild branches have grown, and have overrun the fruits thereof. And because that the wild branches have overcome the roots thereof, it hath brought forth much evil fruit. And because that it hath brought forth so much evil fruit, thou beholdest that it beginneth to perish, and it will soon become ripened, that it may be cast into the fire, except we should do something for it to preserve it. And it came to pass that the servant said unto his master, is it not the loftiness of thy vineyard? Have not the branches thereof overcome the roots which are good? And because the branches have overcome the roots thereof, behold, they grew faster than the strength of the roots, taking strength unto themselves. Behold, I say, is not this the cause that the trees of thy vineyard have become corrupted? That was verse 48. We're skipping to verse 58. And we will nourish again the trees of the vineyard, and we will trim up the branches thereof, and we will pluck from the trees those branches which are ripened that must perish, and cast them into the fire. And this I do, that perhaps the roots thereof may take strength because of their goodness, and because of the change of the branches, that the good may overcome the evil. Perhaps the roots thereof may take strength. Will the roots survive in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? Or are we going to just see this alternate universe continue to overwhelm the definition of what many people believe this church to be? Wherefore, let us go to and labor with our might this last time, for behold, the end draweth nigh, and this is for the last time, that I shall prune my vineyard. Graft in the branches, begin at the last, that they may be first, and that the first may be last, and dig about the trees, both old and young, the first and the last and the first, that all may be nourished once again for the last time. And it came to pass that the Lord of the vineyard sent his servant, and the servant went and did as the Lord had commanded him, and brought other servants, and they were few. Will we have servants answer the call from the priesthood of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to come help him prune his vineyard and stand up for what is right when you see atrocities being committed against the church heritage? Do you have the courage to speak up and speak out? Do you have the courage to work within the system to preserve and protect and defend the heritage of the church? Verse 73, and there began to be the natural fruit again in the vineyard, and the natural branches began to grow and thrive exceedingly. So this is after we've been grafting in and pruning the vineyard and bringing the natural branches back. And the wild branches began to be plucked off and to be cast away. And they did keep the root and the top thereof equal according to the strength thereof. So is this the prophecy that we are going to see the Lord fulfill in the church today? Those wild branches that have overrun the church with bizarre interpretations of the original teachings, will they continue to thrive as we see them thriving right now? And thus they labored with all diligence according to the commandments of the Lord of the vineyard, even until the bad had been cast away out of the vineyard, and the Lord had reserved unto himself that the trees had become again the natural fruit. And they became like unto one body, and the fruits were equal. And the Lord of the vineyard had preserved unto himself the natural fruit, which was most precious unto him from the beginning. And the Lord of the vineyard had said unto them, once again, labor in the vineyard with your might. For behold, this is the last time that I shall nourish my vineyard. This is verse 71, of course. For the end is nigh at hand, and the season speedily cometh. And if ye labor with your might with me, ye shall have joy in the fruit which I shall lay up unto myself against the time which will soon come. And it came to pass that the servants did go and labor with their mights, and the Lord of the vineyard labored also with them. And they did obey the commandments of the Lord in the vineyard in all things. Here's verse 73 and 74. We skipped ahead and read that. And finally, verse 74. The rest of this. And thus they labored with all diligence, according to the commandments of the Lord of the vineyard, even until the bad had been cast away. They became like unto one body. The fruits were equal, and the Lord of the vineyard had preserved unto himself the natural fruit. This is the prophecy of Jacob 5, chapter, the conclusion of the chapter. The natural fruit was preserved, that which was most precious unto him from the beginning. Verse 75, and it came to pass that when the Lord of the vineyard saw his fruit was good, that his vineyard was no more corrupt, he called upon his servants, and said unto them, Behold, for this last time we have nourished my vineyard, and thou beholdest that I have done according to my will, and I have preserved the natural fruit, and it is good, even like as it was in the beginning. The Lord called up his servants, and that his vineyard was no more corrupt after laboring in the vineyard. Concluding with Isaiah 28, the needed awakening. Whom shall he teach knowledge, and whom shall he make to understand doctrine? Them that are weaned from the milk and drawn from the breast. Are you completely reliant on what your stake leaders say when they want to tear down your landmarks and your murals, or are you weaned from that milk? We'll let the video viewers decide. Please comment, like, and subscribe to enable future videos to be created. Thank you.